innovate. It's not just that you can just sit there and sell the same thing over and over, but it's bigger than that even more. It's going to make it even harder, right? Because now you've got a shift in how human workers and organizations are interacting, and that change is happening, and I'll talk a little bit about that. One of the things that's new on the scene is, of course, the internet, but on top of that, you also have these new platform technologies that have really kind of enabled the connection and mobilization of communities, okay? So this is pulling together people that are passionate about the same thing, connecting them with each other, but also kind of finding those efficient ways to match those people to specific tasks and solutions. And this is starting to disrupt our traditional business models. And so this is called open innovation or open talent. It's what I've worked with for a long time now. Crowdsourcing, I'm sure you've heard of it. A lot of you might have just heard of crowdfunding, or you see crowdsourcing as maybe just hackathons. But the reality of it is a very large industry that is emerging with something like 700 platforms that is doing things that we've never seen before. And in fact, it's disrupting. And you've seen it in some forms, right? With, say, Uber, where they're matching at very low friction. So they're matching people that have rides or have a car with people who need a ride. And they're simply doing that in a really efficient way to where you pull up your phone, you hit a few buttons, a car shows up, you hop in, it takes you where you go, and you hop out. That's the kind of low friction that has to happen. Same with Airbnb. Somebody's got a place that someone can stay, somebody needs a place. They match those people up and they take out the risks associated. I remember when Uber first came out, people thought, how would I ever get into some stranger's car? And now we don't even think about it, right? Because the platform has actually taken those risks and mitigated them in really interesting ways. And so the model looks something like this. The curated crowd platform is providing this way to have a two-sided network. On one side, it's a crowd of people, which it's offering them kind of this connection around a common passion, a way to learn and practice and build skills and reputation. It's providing them incentives. But then on the other side, it's saying, look, I've got all these experts and passionate people that can produce product and provide value. I'm going to offer that to businesses. And in fact, that's what they're doing. They're offering innovations and products that business can use by leveraging that via AI, that matching's happening, or challenges, or sometimes just a crowd marketplace where they connect you with a number of these freelance workers. So there's two flavors of this open innovation stuff, or open world. One is open innovation under crowd platforms, and that's like crowds like Topcoder, 1.5 million software engineers and data scientists in one community. And they have a really interesting model where they can develop software through a series of like 20 challenges, and each brings in the experts on user interface or on software design or on architecture. And really a successful model doing some amazing work in algorithms. GrabCAD, 6.5 million mechanical engineers and designers in one community. You can mobilize them to have some creativity around mechanical design you could never do in a traditional marketplace. Tongle's 100,000 filmmakers, all who they've produced like Super Bowl videos, right? Advertisements. Some powerful, passionate people doing interesting things. And the list goes on. There are literally millions of people out in these crowds doing challenges, connecting, using those platforms to learn, and actually accessing innovation by taking advantage of both the diversity of those crowds and the rapid failure that you can kind of get out of the way with a challenge, which is kind of necessary for innovation. So since this is what I work on mainly, I wanted to give some examples of really amazing things that have been done, right? So I give this example a lot. So if you've heard me before, you've heard this story. There was a company that brought in the problem to one of these platforms and said, look, we need a better way to get grease off of our potato chips, right? So the way they did it is they would shake the tray of chips as it came out of a vat of boiling oil, and it would shake the grease off of the potato chips. But it would also break a bunch of the chips. And as we know, Humans only like really big whole potato chips. We don't like the scraps, right? So this was a problem for them. And so they basically brought it into this company. The first thing this company did was they reformulated the problem and said, look, let's not call it that. Let's call it, how do you remove a viscous fluid from a delicate wafer? And that did two things. One, it removed this from the food production area, right? And so now, more than just food production engineers were going to try to solve this problem. You could be a physicist, you could be someone working on silicon wafers. And it obscured, for really reasons of wanting to be hide their name, right? They didn't have to say who they were. And so their competitors didn't necessarily get to see that they were having this problem. And from a competitive standpoint, it was an advantage. So they ran this challenge, 60-day challenge, I think cost about $20,000 for the prize. And it gets a solution. And the solution is to acoustically vibrate the air around those chips at a resonant frequency so that the grease flies off the chip, doesn't damage the chip. And it turns out it's not a mechanical engineer, vibration expert that comes up with this. It's actually a violinist. And that's what these crowds do. They bring kind of those unsuspecting experts into the equation. Another case study out of London Business School is Roche Diagnostics, where they actually had this problem that they had tried to solve for 15 years and spent a ton of time and money trying to solve the problem. They run a 60-day challenge, $20,000. Not only does it get solved, but two independent solvers brought the same solution, which meant it already existed. They just had to discover it. But when they looked at everything that they got submitted, everything they had tried in 15 years of proprietary research was replicated in 60 days by a crowd that was only about 120,000 people. That shouldn't happen, but that's the kind of thing we see in these crowds. A couple other examples I'll give. One is Subsea 7. They do pipeline inspection for undersea pipeline bundles. They would take a ship out at about $1 million a day, drop a van-sized piece of equipment next to the pipeline, and then they would basically spend 2 weeks scanning that pipeline. They went out with a 9 Sigma challenge. 9 Sigma is one of these companies, and within just a couple of weeks, they had found something from the mining industry that had already been developed and was being used that was handheld, that could do that same job in 2 hours. That's 100x improvement. And what they told us is they said, if we hadn't found this and our competitors had, we would no longer be in the pipeline inspection business. And that's what's going on in the innovation world, is the companies that aren't innovating, that aren't trying to find the latest and greatest tech, are not going to be with us for much longer, because there are folks out there that are finding them. Data science is another area where open innovation is just on fire. There's something about the passionate nerds that are data scientists. Harvard was studying this phenomenon, and they wanted to try a test. So they actually they got with the National Institutes of Health, who had a kind of turnkey algorithm that they used a lot, that they had built over several years for a couple $1 million. And it ran at about 4.5 hours. They could do maybe 2 runs a day, and it had an accuracy of about 0.72. And they put 2 really experts in this field who really had domain knowledge and were great data scientists to improve this. And they did improve it. They improved it an order of magnitude, got it down to 47 minutes instead of 4.5 hours. So they could do like 10 runs a day, and they increased the accuracy at the same time. Only spent about $120K doing that. Took them about a year. They then ran a 2-week contest on Topcoder, and that had a $6,000 prize, and it resulted in a 16-second algorithm runtime and increased the accuracy to 0.8. And what I like to point out here, this is the logarithmic chart that's getting shorter as you go to the left, is that not only is that big red dot the winner, 2 or actually 3 orders of magnitude better than the baseline, there's a group of 25 dots there right to the lower right, which are all the losers who all had solutions 2 to 3 orders of magnitude better than the baseline. There's just something magical about what's going on there, and the crowd is able to provide some really neat stuff. And that's what I've been working on for a long time. We've done about 400 challenges. I've done about 100 myself. And there's just amazing results that we're getting out of this. But what we've also noticed is it's not just this open innovation contest community. We're seeing that there's an overlap with other communities that are involved in freelance work and gig economy. And in fact, some of them are doing dual duty where they're actually doing different models that are hybrid. So Top Coder, for instance, you can do contests, but you can also hire freelancers. And so that really got us interested in, well, what's going on here? And what we found was a whole set of crowds we didn't even know existed. These open talent platforms like Freelancer, which has 45 million users. That's the equivalent of a third of the U.S. Workforce in one community. TaskRabbit, 99 Designs, Etsy, we get all of these communities are where almost anyone can come and join and somehow take advantage of the global marketplace. But then we also found that there were expert crowds like TopTal and Maven and Catalan, Upwork, Paro, and BTG, who actually take senior experienced folks and recruit them in to be experts. Catalan is really interesting. It's like 40,000 consultants. And what they do is they recruit all of the burnouts from the big three. So to get into that crowd, you have to have experience working at the big three consulting firms. And then they bring you in and offer those same services for a fraction of the price. This is a really interesting model, right? And what we're seeing is that freelancers' workforce is increasing at 3 times the overall workforce. And in fact, in a more recent study, they showed that over 40% of an average organization's total workforce is comprised of non-employee labor, which is double what it was just 7 years ago. If these are predictions or projections are true, then the study from Edelman Intelligence shows that by the year 2027, there will be more freelance laborers full-time than there are regular organizational workers. That's a huge shift. And in fact, COVID's actually accelerating this because remote work is accelerating. People are getting laid off. They're going to come back as contingent work. And this big snowball seems to be happening. And that same study showed some really interesting stats, right? So nearly 2/3 of these freelancers reported making more money freelancing than they did working for companies. They showed that over half, the chart's wrong, over half said that they would not go work for a company no matter how much you paid them. Think about that. Over half of full-time freelancers said, no matter how much you offer me, I'm not going to go work for an organization. There is a shift going on, and it has to do with a lot of things, but one of them is workers' dissatisfaction with the current way large organizations work. Part of it goes to the lifelong learning. We live in a world now that is changing so fast that to stay competitive in the workforce, you have to always be learning. But companies actually prevent that. If you look at the difference between how freelancers learn and non-freelancers, you see that freelancers learn at much higher rates than non-freelancers. And that's because that's what they do with their extra time. But if you're in a company, you're not allowed to. In fact, the average for a company is about $1,000 per day, or per year rather, per employee of training. That's not going to get you up to speed with the latest and greatest tech, right? That's mostly compliance. And so I just want to give an example of some of the creativity that's going on. Paro.io is a finance and accounting crowd here in the US, and they do some really interesting things. But one of the things they do is they use machine learning to match a client's need with a freelancer. But when they do this, they actually match them in a way that freelancer, they keep such amazing data. They keep digital exhaust, if you will, on everything that those people have done and are doing. So much richer data than anything organizations have. They use this machine learning, and they can actually match to where when that person gets assigned, they know it's going to be a little bit of a struggle for them to do that task. And they give them some support to do that. But by the time they complete that task, they have upskilled that freelancer. That freelancer is smarter and a better resource than they were going into it. Now think about that. every task they're assigning, their crowd is getting more powerful. Imagine if you did that with your employee base, right? There's some new models here that can really only be done in this